Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name's Rory Paquette, and I know you know that. I just like to remind myself about how lucky I am to be sitting in this seat. Absolutely blessed, folks. When we made the jump to 5 days, you folks, you came through, subscribing and liking and sending DMs. And then when I pushed the envelope and we went to 7 days, everybody thought I was crazy, but not you folks. You folks stepped up to where our Sunday episodes now are some of our best. And it's just an absolute gift and a blessing. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us. If you're not out there doing what you're doing, I don't get to sit here and do what I'm doing. So I really appreciate that, folks. And if you're a friend of the program, and I'm pretty sure you are, you know what's coming next. We got to pay some bills. So let me take a sip of my preferred beverage. Mm. Oh, man, that is good stuff. Just made a new cup. Oh, wow. It is Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful, folks, just like my wife. They brew a mean bean. It's a fantastic cup of joe. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans, which is one of the biggest reasons why we support them. Folks, if you're a veteran out there, we thank you for your service. We love you, and we're glad that you have a home here at Power Man Podcast. Folks, check them out. Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Tell them Power Man sent you. Let me get one more sip of this before I tackle this young buck across the table from me. All right, quite the story coming your way today. Here we go. Please welcome to the podcast the author of Hiding from the School Bus. And I'm going to let him tell you about the rest of this. And please welcome Calvin. Is it Bagley or Bagley?
Depends on who's asking. In the Midwest, they call me Bagley, and in the West, they call me Bagley. So whichever you
I was
prefer.
going with Bagley, but correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I get your name right, brother.
Yeah. Well, typically I say Bagley, but I have a lot of friends in Chicago, and they do call me Bagley.
All right, good deal. So Calvin Bagley, for the correct pronunciation, has joined us today. He's got a great nature about him, folks. You're going to absolutely love talking to him. I already do. And he's got quite a story that I can't wait to hear. So, Calvin, listen, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody a little bit about who is Calvin. What are you about? What brings you here today, brother?
Hey, Roy, appreciate it, and I'm also excited to be here and to talk to you. I just released my memoir, Hiding from the School Bus, and it's my past that is kind of the story untold to many of my friends and many of my business associates. Most people know me from my work. I work in Medicare insurance. My company, Nuvo Health, has expanded across the country, and over the past 15 years, we've gotten to the point where we've helped, almost 60,000 people to decide what type of insurance that they want for Medicare. And so I've gotten very comfortable talking about Medicare and being on stages and explaining how Medicare works and making YouTube videos and all the things to try to educate people. But behind all of that and what people know, about me publicly is my past and my childhood that is very different from what a lot of people might assume. And so Hiding from the School Bus came at a time in my life where it felt right to share my story and to open up and explain, my past and where I came from and the challenges that I've overcome, hopefully to encourage others who face difficulties and challenges themselves, but also to document for my own family, for my wife and my children and those who will come after me, my story and my life. And it's not exactly the most comfortable thing to do, to talk about your own story and your own life. Particularly for me, I've always kind of hid it from people, and now I'm laying bare all that has happened, or at least some of the significant things, in the hope of documenting that, sharing it with my family, my friends, and encouraging others who have challenging journeys, which oftentimes people have challenges that they are bearing silently. And I feel that was me for a long time.
Interesting. Is this the first time you've been able to kind of let this out and talk about it?
Except to close friends, I have not shared most of what is in the book. And even some of my closest friends, I was at church on Sunday, and one of my friends who I have known for almost 25 years, he read the manuscript and said, "Calvin, I had no idea."
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, when our closest friends don't know the pain that we're holding, that's rough, man. That really is. Now, you this all kind of started when you were a kid in a fairly strict Mormon house, from what I understand, just from talking to you. Where do you want to start the story, brother? I mean, it's up to you. It's your story.
I think I would start the story from something that happened maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
I was in a business meeting, listening to one of my heroes in business. I have heroes in different parts of my life. And this hero in business I was listening to, and his name is Gino Wickman. And many people know Gino because he wrote the book Traction. And a lot of businesses, and I'm an entrepreneur, I love starting new things and building businesses and succeeding and failing and succeeding. Failing happens more often than success, but eventually it all adds up. And so I'm listening to Gino, and I was very excited because he's one of my business idols. And he came to this group that I'm a part of, and he sat in front of us and he started to talk about something that surprised me. He started to talk about himself and his personal journey. And I expected to talk about business, but instead he said, a few years ago I was in this business meeting and it was a conference. And a person came on stage and said, "Hey, I'm going to take you on this journey. I want you to close your eyes." And he said, "So I was game. I'll go along. I want you to close your eyes and just breathe for a few minutes and then look into your heart." He takes us down this story as he followed himself all the way into his heart. And then the woman said, "Open the door to your heart and look inside and see what you see in there. And tell me what you see." And you don't have to tell everyone if it's something that's private to you, but what do you see in your heart? And when he opened the door to his heart, he said, "I just saw black, darkness, and shame." I said, but other people around me were seeing happiness and light, and they'd open their heart, and it was full of light and love and everything, and how much love they felt. And I didn't feel that. And as he was saying this, I was doing the same thing. And I have lived a very, very good life. I've been very, very blessed. And I've also tried very hard to walk in the way, like live a Christian life. And I opened my heart in that moment and I felt the same thing. Why do I see and feel blackness in my heart? Why is there pain and shame in my heart when I know that I have tried to do the right thing? I know that I've followed Christ, and tried to live this Christian lifestyle. And I've been honest in my dealings with other men and honest in my business dealings and honest with my wife and faithful to her. Why do I feel darkness inside? And then as he shared this, and I was experiencing the same thing he had experienced, he said, that led me to selling my company, which he sold a very, very successful company, and trying to find out why am I broken and going down this whole path of discovering what was inside of me and learning to love myself and appreciating who I was and learning to love myself. So in that moment, I had this realization I needed the same thing. I need to explore and find out, why do I feel darkness? Why do I feel shame or guilt or whatever it is inside of me instead of light and love? And these last, 3, 4 years have been discovery. Now, I didn't go as far as Gino. I haven't sold my companies. I still got bills to pay, and I'm not as successful as Gino Wickman, who I admire in business and now admire on a personal level too, because he found light and love in his life, and that led to light and love in his business. And I feel that I have been on the journey the same. And I'm not to say that I have arrived. I don't know that anyone has arrived, but I am on that journey. And I've made a lot of progress over the last 3 or 4 years and have learned to love myself and find love in the world that was all around me that I was not feeling because of this darkness that was a lot of the weight from my childhood, a lot of the weight of expectations that I had put that I won't say that others had put on me, but that I had accepted from others that had become my own expectation of myself. And so that journey eventually led to me writing my story. And so hiding from the school bus is that story. And we can go into that story, but that's the reason for the story. The reason for the story was I wanted to find love in my heart. And, to put a ribbon on that, I guess I can look in my heart now and feel warmth and see light. I can look at myself in the mirror and look in my own eyes and appreciate myself and understand who I am. And that's the journey that I've been on.
First of all, Power to you. Good for you, because that's the type of thing that we all have to go through about whatever demons we're carrying around. Um, I talk to men every day who deal with things that are similar. I mean, everybody has their story. Yours sounds like it was fairly rough. The understanding that we have that blackness that you were describing, I understand that that's kind of the first step. Like, wow, I really do have this in me. I need to do something. I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not where I should be. But where most of us kind of fall down is we don't know how to start. So my question for you right off the bat is, how did you start and how did you know where to start?
That's a really good question. I kind of took help from those who went before me, like Gino, who explained that
Right.
he began to see a therapist and other things. And that, for me, that's where it started. I have always kind of avoided therapy, and I've known a lot of. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but I've known some therapists. I won't say a lot, but I've known some therapists that went into therapy after having experienced great trauma themselves. And sometimes in my conversations with them, I didn't feel that they had resolved their own trauma, and they had a need to help others, which is wonderful. But I don't know that they were resolved themselves. And so I was very concerned about putting my broken self into broken hands. And so I was very blessed when I found the right therapist, someone who shared my religious beliefs, someone who I felt was, and I went to multiple therapists before I found the person. And I found John, and I write about John a little bit in my book, and he was very helpful. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect was to open up to my spouse about what I was feeling and to be very real with my wife, Carissa, and share with her some of this experience and this journey, and to have her encouragement. There was also discussions that I had with some of my religious leaders and people that I look up to at church. So it was not just one, piece, but there are good people around you. If you're watching or listening to this and you have felt what I felt, then look to the good people around you and begin to open up. And you open up more and more and more. And the more that you open up, the more that light comes in.
Nice. That had to be unsettling, opening up to your wife like that about this sort of thing. How long you guys been married at the time?
We just celebrated 19 years.
Oh,
So
okay.
we would have been married about 16 years at this time.
Okay. So it's fairly established. It wasn't like it was brand new and she didn't know what to expect from you or anything. She knows who you are at that point, right?
At this point, she knows what she's gotten herself into.
Exactly. Right. So, what was her reaction when you said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something"? Boom, here it is.
You know, that sometimes we think that we're holding things that no one sees. I mean, she is the one person in my life that knows every story of my life and has been with me all the way through, all the way through the last 19 years. I'm turning 50 this month. And so, you know, the but she's been with me for 19 years and I've been with her 19 years. So sometimes we think that the people around us don't see the pain that we're carrying and that we're suffering, or how we react to things, or the things that cause us to react. Some call them triggers. Things sometimes we react in ways that are patterns that we're repeating from our past, that our mind and our body have made shortcuts. And it's a good thing that we can have shortcuts to decisions, and we can handle life because we have this ability to quickly make decisions. But sometimes we're stuck in patterns and we're on loops and we keep repeating mistakes. And sometimes we're repeating mistakes from our childhood. Sometimes we're repeating other mistakes that we created ourselves. Sometimes they're mistakes that we watched others make. And each time that we react in those ways, and each time that we trigger that mistake, it's as if to our body, whatever that trauma was that started it, whether it was our trauma or some other trauma that was induced upon us, it's like it just happened again. It's like it happened this week or last week. It's not that it happened 40 years ago. When we react again, it's like it happened this week. And so my wife could see all those things. And she was there to love me and support me and encourage me. And of course, when I came to her and said, honey, this is what I've felt. I went to this, I had just had this experience with Gino Wickman, and this is what I felt. There was nothing but love and encouragement. And it's not the first time that she said, "Hey, maybe you should get some professional help."
Oh, really? Okay. All right. That had come up in the past. Was that just based on, behavior or, you folks getting along, or was that because she sensed that there were things that you were dealing with from your past?
I think it's because she understood and knew my story, and she had seen what my suffering had been, and everyone has their suffering. And sometimes traumas are not, some of my traumas are pretty large, but that doesn't make them any more real or less real than other people's traumas. Everyone has these things that have happened in their life, at least most people do, and your body reacts to them. And so she had seen that, and she knew my stories. And so, her encouragement has always been out of love. But I write in my book as I get towards the end that, one of the deep things for me was being around so much anger and fighting as a child. And so there is a part of me that has anger and that reacts in anger. And that that piece of me is a part of me. And so part of what I experienced with my therapist John was to begin to discover these different pieces of me and to understand where their place is. There's a movement that many are familiar with among men. That's it's called lions, not sheep, and you have a lion in your background right there.
Yeah.
There is a time for aggression, there is a time for strength, and there is a time to be a lion. And sometimes there's a movement in our society and culture to remove the lion from among the people, but the lion is needed. The lion is the protector, and there's a place for the lion. And so to understand and to not hate that part of yourself, the part that maybe is reacting and maybe reacting wrong, and you need to know when to use the lion, when not to use the aggression, because the lion can overpower others, right? Um, and do it in the wrong way. But understanding and appreciating that about yourself and knowing that that part of you is important and appreciating that part and accepting it, and then finding the other parts of you too, because we are all uh, multifaceted. There are many aspects to us, not just, I am not just a lion, but I am also one of the sheep.
It's interesting the way you put that. I can appreciate the perspective that you're coming from, though. The First of all, that's great that you had that relationship with your wife. I know that a lot of men, that's one of their biggest fears, is that as soon as they become vulnerable like that in front of their wives, they're going to be perceived as weak, and their wives are going to then turn around and use it to kind of beat them up, with it, and that's happened too many times. So it's great that you had that relationship, that kind of support system to be able to start dealing with this in the way you did. You mentioned, in your bio that you did a lot of deep healing work. Was that the therapy, or were there things in addition to the therapy that you ended up, doing to try and come to grips with what this was and start dealing with it?
I mean, from a secular standpoint, I talk a lot about the therapy because that was a very important piece for me. But it has a religious component to me. Everything to me is connected with God, and I um, when I'm working with my therapist, who I found that I love and appreciate, John, it has to align for me with my feeling that I've had over my life that God has been there for me and that He has been guiding me all along. So it's very easy to point at the therapy and how impactful it has been to me. But the only reason that I ended up in that room is this long journey where there were forces at work helping me along the way. And I don't believe in fate. I don't believe that we arrive somewhere and it's like, oh, I was always supposed to be here. That takes away freedom. That takes away the ability to make choices. I mean, if fate is what determines where we end, and when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason, um, I don't believe that. I believe that you can find a reason and you can make a reason out of everything, and you can find something positive and it can become a building block for you, no matter how terrible it is. But not everything. Sometimes the reason is you were stupid.
Right?
That sometimes is why things have happened to me. Everything happens for a reason. Yeah, the reason is I was being stupid. So if from that regard, I can agree with it. But from the standpoint of, yes, God made that happen to me. No, I don't believe that. I think that I believe in a God that gave us freedom of choice and that that is the most sacred of all gifts. And with that, we can make something out of ourselves. And in order to do that, we have to stumble all along the way. And so I look at God kind of whatever, however you believe in God. For me, God is a father. I look at him like a father. And I have my own two children. And every day I'm trying to help them to grow up and to prepare to face life. And I feel like God's doing the same thing for me. And so all along my journey, I've had these moments where they were like check ins, like signposts along a trail. And I feel sometimes, I often feel that I was supposed to arrive at those places, but that how I got there was a very wandering journey. And that all along the way, God was influencing me. And so, to answer your question, to get to this point where I say, you know, I'm very blessed to have this really good therapist, and he had such an impact on me. The healing actually happened all along the way, and I was blessed all along the way through uh, leaders in business, mentors, personal mentors, leaders at church, great, conferences and speakers that I've had an opportunity to listen to, music that's touched my heart, my wife, my children, the birth of my children. All these things along the way have been putting together my fractured heart. And sometimes we just need to open ourselves up and allow those things to touch us, because I think each of them are signs of God, but they are just part of our journey. And we can make our journey what we want it to be.
I love that about free will, 100%. And yeah, free will kind of flies in the face of fate.
It does.
You can't really have both. So I agree with you, by the way, wholeheartedly. Um, an interesting part of your story is that your faith is what ends up helping get you through it and what you lean on to heal and grow and move forward. And yet it was a situation sort of surrounding your parents' interpretation of faith, wasn't it? That sort of started all of this?
Yes, my journey is a little different than a lot of people who grow up in an overly religious home, that I would even say was extremist in belief, because oftentimes that leads to rebellion. And I've seen that with my siblings. There are eight siblings, nine, there's nine of us, so I have eight siblings, and each of us have our own journeys and our own tales. But many of them moved away from religion as a result of our upbringing. So my upbringing starts in a little country area in northern Utah, where I was born in the hospital of Vernal, Utah, but my family lived very far from that. My father managed a ranch. He was the foreman of a ranch for the Ute Indian tribe, or the Ute Native American tribe, and that was in the north, like east corner of Utah, near Wyoming and Colorado. And the tribe that the not the tribe, but the ranch that he managed was about 20 miles down a very country pothole road, followed by 20 miles on a pothole dirt road to get to this little trailer house where there were six kids and mom and dad, living. And I came home, and the story that is told by my sister, who was 14 years older than me, she's my oldest sister, is that mom and dad came home from the hospital. I was the seventh child. This is back in 1975. And my mother handed me to my 14-year-old sister and said, "This one's yours." And um, my sister, being 14 years old, having full maternal responsibilities, having almost no help from my mother. My mother would feed me. She'd breastfeed me, and that was about all the mothering that she did. Everything was done by my sister. And so my sister having all these emotions of essentially being a mother at 14 years old. And we're living out in the middle of nowhere. We have no neighbors, no people. The only interaction with the outside world is Sunday church. And prior to this, my parents were not as extreme in their beliefs, but their beliefs kind of changed as they got isolated. And that's where isolation comes into my stories. That my parents had lived in Salt Lake City, and they were living close to my grandparents, my father's parents, and my dad had tried to start businesses. He had multiple, service station businesses and other things that he had tried and failed at. And they then my parents went out to this extremely isolated area and started to homeschool their children because they had to. And that isolation led to more and more extreme beliefs, to the point that things that were forbidden in my home were eating chocolate, eating most meats other than a little bit of chicken here and there, or meat that my father had hunted, which was very rare and far in between, and few and far in between. Wearing shorts even for the boys, I mean, that was considered to be immodest. When I got to the age of a teenager and was able to play church basketball, the fight that begins with a prayer, I had to wear jeans or sweats. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. That would be considered immodest. And there were many other very niche and extreme beliefs of my parents. Although they did practice the religion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon religion, they had all of their own little extreme beliefs into it. And our isolation started out of necessity, but then became a way of living and became almost religious isolation. So here's my sister at 14 years old with me, just a baby, and she was very confused and didn't know what to do, but took care of me like a mother. Until I was about 3 years old, when my father realized that I believed my sister to be my mother, even as a 3-year-old. And this really upset him. And one day, I write about this in the book, and most of this I've taken from my sister's writings and from her sharing it with me. She was sitting with me sitting with me at the piano. My parents had a piano in this tiny trailer. We were living in a 2-bedroom trailer. At this point, my younger brother had been born, so there were 8 children, so 10 people, 8 children, 2 parents, 2-bedroom trailer, and a piano. And my sister was playing the piano, and my dad burst in the room and was very upset and said, "You are not his mother," and took me from her and put me on my mother's lap and made my mother hold me. And he told her, my sister, "You should never touch him again." And so for me, this was the beginning of trauma. I mean, I think about to me as a baby, and my body believed that, and my mind believed that my sister was my mother and that she loved me. I don't know. I'm sure that there was some way that I understood the difference between a mother and a sister or something, but I had made this bond to my sister, and she was not allowed to ever touch me again. Well, shortly after that, she left home, and years later, she joined the military and went into the Navy. And I remember when she left that I was so distraught. And even then, I didn't understand why I was so distraught, but there was a sense of abandonment, that my mother was abandoning me, even though it was my sister. And that was the start of the trauma. By the time I was 10 years old, there was no homeschooling, there were no books. There wasn't any class time. There wasn't any teaching. It had just all given way to hiding from the school bus. When the school bus, we would go out and do our chores in the morning, milk the goats, take care of the animals, all the things we needed to do in the morning, work in the garden for a little while. And when the bus came by in my little rural area, because we had moved to another area at that point, we had to hide from it. My parents didn't want the bus to see us because they were concerned that people would know that there were these kids out there that were not being educated. And then after the school bus went by, we went in the house and we would stay indoors for that time. Eventually, my older siblings left, and there were 4 sisters, followed by 4 brothers. And after the 4 sisters left, and the brothers were in the house, and we had to do things like mill grain and make bread. And because we lived off the land in a very, very isolated area, sometimes without a working bathroom, using an outhouse. I mean, just this other world that this was in the 1980s. You would expect this to be in the 1880s, not the
Yeah.
1980s. And we would stay indoors, and when the school bus went by the second time, we could go outside, and the dad would have chores for us, and we would work, and we would haul rocks, and we would do a lot of different things to keep the garden going, to provide for the family. And this was my childhood. Mixed in there a lot of fighting, and my parents having a very very poor relationship, and yelling and throwing things at each other and all these types of things, and us in isolation. And that's the foundation for the rest of my life that I have been overcoming little by little, getting an education, and we can talk through that. But that's the foundation of it all.
I mean, wow, it really does sound like Little House on the Prairie type stuff, and it's not that long ago. So yeah, how did you end up? I'm sure there's a story to it, but how did you end up getting educated finally? Because there had to be a bunch of stuff you were missing by not, getting all the basics and stuff when you were younger, right?
Yeah, there was a point when I was a teenager, that a late teen, that I wanted so badly to go to school, even though my parents, of course, still forbade it. But I I had such a desire that I wanted to go, but even I didn't push for it anymore. Because when I was younger, I would push for it a little bit and say, I want to go to school, which always upset my parents. But as I got older, I didn't push for it anymore, because I knew that I could not add up. I didn't know very, very basic things. And at one point, I confronted my mother when I was about 16 years old. And I said, this whole homeschool thing was a sham. I was very angry, not my best moment. Said some things that wouldn't make the situation better for sure, but upset her greatly. But even in my heart, I realized that I didn't want to go to school anymore. I couldn't do basic things like mathematics. So my father's belief was, teach a child to read. If you teach a child to read, they'll learn everything when they're ready. Unfortunately, it kind of worked out for me that way. Also, unfortunately, that I don't want to make him prove him right. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way for many of my siblings. Many of my siblings really, really, really struggled with life. And I love them, and they have their own stories, and I'm not trying to tell their stories, even though I share some pieces in my book. It's their stories to share. But I don't believe what my father said. I think that children need education, right? So what happened to me is that when I was about 7 years old, I wanted to learn to read. And downstairs, a remnant of my parents' past homeschooling, before it became what I call no schooling, was that there was the alphabet across the top of the living room. And so I came down the stairs and I looked at it and I said, well, I don't know if it starts this way or that way. Which way does it go? And so I memorized the alphabet backwards. And so I sat down with my sister, not my oldest sister, but my fourth sister. She's the one who taught me to read. And so we sat down to read, but instead of ABC, for me it was Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A.
That was
And
impressive. All right.
yeah, so she taught me to read, and she took me through the phonics course, and I learned to read, and I took to it very quickly. I was very blessed to be able to learn to read quickly. And the thing that my family did together is we would read scriptures. And so we would read, and I read a lot about that in my book, and some of the funny stories that happen around religion and things. But that's the education that I got. And so when I was 19 years old, I determined that I wanted to serve a mission for the Mormon Church, or the LDS Church, and I submitted all my paperwork, and my paperwork went to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then I received a letter in the mail back. And that's how you find out where you're going. You don't choose where you go. It's not like there's a list of places and you decide. You receive a call, a mission call.
Yeah.
So I got my paper in the mail, and I opened it up, and it said, Calvin Bagley, you've been called to serve as a representative of Jesus Christ, and you are called to labor in the Brazil Curitiba mission. And I looked at that and I said, Brazil? Is that in Africa? But I was so excited, because the idea of going to learn a language and going to some foreign place was just unbelievable. I mean, I had been to Utah, Idaho, and Nevada. Those are the places I'd been in my life. So I went to the Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah, where I learned to speak Portuguese, and I only had 8 weeks there just to get the basics down. And I got the basics down, and I get sent off to Brazil, and I live in Brazil for 2 years, 2 amazing years from 1994 to 1996. And that experience was incredible because, for one, um, I always had faith in God, but it solidified my faith in God. Some of the experiences that I had and I saw and I experienced in blessing people, teaching people, talking to people, listening to people, it just changed my life forever and solidified my relationship with God. In addition to that, learning another language was an incredible education and taught me so much about English. A kid who doesn't know how to punctuate things or doesn't know how to what a verb is, but has to learn another language and has to learn to conjugate verbs and doesn't know what nouns and adverbs and everything are, what they are, but has to learn them in order to learn Portuguese. So I learned Portuguese, and that taught me English. So I came home from my mission at 21 years old in 1996, and I decided that I wanted to get an education. I mean, all of my missionary, I'm sure you've seen Mormon missionaries. They're always, running two by two. It's we call it a companion. So all of my companions, they all had plans on going to college. Almost all of them were Americans. I almost had all American companions while I was in Brazil. And I said, I want to be able to do that. And so I came home and I started to study for the GED. I got a job. I was working, of all places, at a pawn shop, and I bought a study guide for the GED, and I studied and learned and taught myself at nights. And one night I was sitting there working, studying late, and my dad looked at that, and I want to say before I say this, my dad has passed away, and I love and appreciate my dad. I wouldn't be who I am without him. I disagree with so much of what he did. I don't know his reasons for it.
Sure.
I don't understand his own traumas. I know the traumas that he placed on us, and they were wrong. But I still love him, and I will say that I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be who I am were it not for my parents. But my dad looked at the study guide, and he said, "What are you doing that for? I mean, do you need somebody to tell you that you're smart?" And he didn't approve of me studying for the GED. So I successfully passed the GED, and I got my essentially my equivalent high school diploma, and I was very proud. I was almost 22 years old. And then I said, my next step is I'm going to try to go to college. It's hard to explain what a mountain that is when you have never been in a classroom once in your life. I mean, the only classrooms I had been in is I was in a classroom for driver's education when I was 16 years old. That was my first time ever setting foot into a school. And I had been in classrooms for 8 weeks learning Portuguese at the Missionary Training Center for
Wow.
the LDS Church. And so the idea of going to college just was like completely out of reach, but I was going to do it. And so I studied again. I bought the ACT study guide, and I studied again for weeks and weeks and weeks, and went and took the ACT. Well, this time it wasn't like a GED. GED is a much simpler test. I completely bombed it. I bombed it so badly that, and I tried still submitting, applications to schools, but I could not be accepted at any university. And
Wow.
so I moved to Las Vegas where my brother was living. And, and that's where I, came across my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, who was incredible, Julie. She was a great blessing in my life. And she became the person that helped me to overcome so many of these barriers to eventually get into college. But yeah, the homeschool thing, a lot of people call it homeschool, and homeschool has gained legitimacy. But for me, it was no school.
Right. I, the whole time I'm listening to this, I'm wondering in the back of my mind, what was the plan? From your parents' standpoint, what was the plan? To have you grow up and work on the farm? Because I mean, they weren't really preparing you for anything else in life by not letting you learn anything, right? So What was I get their idea, isolation, leads to a lot of things, but it doesn't sound like there was a plan there.
It it seemed to me that my parents' only goal was to protect us from influences that they deemed as bad influences. And beyond that, I don't know that there was a plan.
Yeah, and even then, you have to ask, they're only going to do it for so long. They didn't try to stop anybody from leaving the house, did they?
They did initially with my
Did they?
sisters,
Okay.
but my sisters left in such a way that it began to break my parents down. I think one of the things that helped me being the seventh child is that they were more and more broken down by watching their older children make choices that they didn't agree with,
I see.
um, and that helped for me to soften my parents some. But yeah, my sister was tried to she tried to my oldest sister, the one that I had shared had acted as my mother. She tried to move out to Provo, Utah, and try to, go to school at BYU and things. She had some education. I think she went to school. Well, my parents moved out into nowhere, into the middle of nowhere, when she was about 12. So before that, she'd gone to school, and so she had some foundation in formal education. And my parents actually, they kind of ran a homeschool the first few years, so she had some education to rely on. But when she was trying to go to school, my dad called her and said, "You need to come home. Like the family needs you. We're struggling to make ends meet and to provide food for the whole family." And he brought her home, went out and got her, brought her home, and she worked, and the money that she made went to the family and didn't go to her. And at this point, she was like, 20, or yeah, about 20 years old. And so it was my
Wow.
father's mentality was that of the turn of the previous century, where the whole family has to work to survive. And
Yeah.
they weren't really preparing anyone for the future, as far as I could tell, just trying to survive the moment.
Wow. Man. Almost like building a commune or something, right? Where everybody's intended to just stay there for life.
Yeah. Yeah. My
Okay.
father was friends with some fundamentalist Mormon polygamists, although he was not a polygamist himself and decried, polygamy, and believed in the core tenets of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which does not practice polygamy, but he was close to some of those more extreme sects. And uh, I saw, yeah, it was like building a commune, and to break free of that was no small feat. And each of my siblings did in their own way. But my way took me to Las Vegas, where my sister-in-law went with me to a store called Learning is Fun. And we looked at every book of math, because math was so hard for me. I just did not understand how to do math. And so she started at 12th grade and went 11th, 10th, ninth, all the way down, saying, "Hey, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do this?" My sister-in-law was a registered nurse. My brother had moved to Las Vegas and had become my brother became very successful in business, and his wife taught me these things. We ended up picking up the lowest book we picked up was grade 3. We picked up the third grade math book, and I would work through the third grade math book, and she would help me along the way, and she helped me from 3 through 12. And I still was denied by the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, to be able to matriculate. But she called. She said, "No, this isn't good enough." And Julie called down and said, "We're going to get a counselor down there." And she set up an appointment for me, and I went down and met with a counselor and an admissions counselor, and explained my situation, explained what I had done, shown how I studied on my own, gotten the GED and everything. And she said, "Okay, you know what? We'll give you a try. We're going to let you be a non-admitted student, and you can go for 2 semesters. And if you can get a good enough grade, then we will accept you and admit you as an admitted student." And that was my entry point to college.
Wow, you had to go lobby for it. All right.
I had to lobby for it.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
my 2 semesters went well. I was successful. I got a 4.0. I studied so hard. And, that whole experience, like I said, it's hard to explain to someone who's never been in a classroom what it's like to enter a classroom for the first time, what it is to take a test and you taken a test before, or use a Scantron or all these other things that people had experience doing.
Mhm.
And I did very well. But after those 2 semesters getting admitted, I realized I'm not used to the structure. Or maybe I didn't realize. I realize now. I didn't realize back then. I was not used to that structure. I didn't know how to handle myself. And I ended up running away from college and going off, and I became a flight attendant, began to fly around the world as a flight attendant for United Airlines, and had some incredible experiences there. Ended up being on a plane on September 11th on a
Oh, wow.
tarmac in Chicago with some of my good friends that were all together on that plane. I knew some of the people that died that day and had flown with some of them. And that after 9/11, I decided, you know what, this has been really fun. I had an amazing time seeing the world and flying around and having this experience as a flight attendant. It's time to take life seriously again. And that's when I returned to UNLV. And that's where I met my wife, Carissa. And over, many years completed my degree. It was actually 10 years from the time that I got my first credits at UNLV to the time that I graduated with a bachelor's in business administration. They say, what do you call someone who goes to school for 10 years? Doctor? Uh, for
Right.
me, no, I was not a doctor. I was very proud to complete my bachelor's, even though it was a 10-year program for me,
No, you
with a
should be
lot of
though, man. Yeah.
things in between.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you very
I'm
much.
really glad to hear that's how that part of that story ends. So good for you on that. I can't even imagine not being exposed to any of the things that you weren't, well, not exposed to, and then hopping on a plane. And now it's not even just, the United States and the stuff that's in America, that's stuff you haven't seen or heard before. But now you're going to countries where you don't even know where they are.
Yeah.
I mean,
Travel has become a big part of my life and story and
wow.
and my development as a person. I've learned that having experience in different cultures and places, it makes you a better person. It makes you more appreciative of what you have, who you are, and who are around, and the people around you. And it gives you the ability also to talk to other people who have different opinions from you, people have different ways of living than you. When you have seen where they live and how they um, and how they function in their place in their society, it helps you um, to love and appreciate people differently. And so, it started with me going to Brazil. After I'd seen Brazil, I was like, I've got to see more of the world. And Brazil, the people of Brazil, I just love them, and I learned to love that place in their place in the culture. I write one of the stories I write about is blessing a child that was, as a essentially a pastor is what you think of a missionary. Essentially, they're these young pastors exploring, going all around the world, and this woman comes up to us, and she's in this state of just panic, and she says, I need you to come right now. My child is dying, and you're pastors, right?" And we said, "Well, yeah, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and whatever." And she's like, "Well, come with me." And so we follow her, and we're going through this area into a favela. And favelas in Brazil are these very, very downtrodden areas with open sewers. They don't have running water. In many cases, they don't have electricity.
Oh, wow.
And we're following her into her house, and the house is smaller than my office here. It's just this tiny one, large one-room space with a little bedroom area in the back. And there is her son, just a child, and he's lying there, and you can feel the thickness of death in the room. He's almost can't breathe. And she asks us to bless him. And my companion actually at the time happened to be a brand new American from the States, and so he barely understanding the language, and he's looking to me with big eyes like, what do we do? And so we laid our hands on his head and we blessed him. And the the next day we said, well, let's go back and let's check on that woman and the child. And we walked up to the house, and the woman is like smiling, she's beaming, and she's like, "Oh, elders," because everybody calls us elders. "Elders, come in, come in." And we said, "Where's your son? Is he okay?" And she said, "Well, why don't you ask him?" And she pointed to the street, and there were boys playing soccer in the road, and there was that boy playing soccer in the road. So that the experiences like that, just I just fell in love with the people and the place, and I said, I've got to see more of the world. So I guess where I was going with this is being a flight attendant was this incredible opportunity for me to travel all over the world and to go to Europe and to go to Asia and to go back to South America. The United Airlines actually hired me because I spoke Portuguese. And so I would often translate Portuguese on flights to Brazil. So I'd fly down to Brazil frequently and get to see those people that I loved so much. And that evolved into this just love of travel and going places, which culminated in where the book ends in my life. And that is that for my 50th birthday, which is coming up in 2 weeks here, my wife and I went to Antarctica to visit the seventh continent, my seventh continent on my 50th birthday. It wasn't on my birthday because you can't go to Antarctica in August. It would be much too cold. But we went back in January and we had the opportunity to set foot on Antarctica and to even climb some peaks and things. Nothing huge, but to experience that place. And it was a really, self-reflective moment for me to think this child, born that felt unloved by his parents, whether that was true or not. You could say that the facts wouldn't make sense to some people. Maybe they made sense to my parents, but regardless, the result was that I felt unloved and without education, not being able to, struggling to do things like graduate, get a GED to say I have a high school equivalent graduation, be able to go to college, all of these things, to end up standing on a mountaintop in Antarctica at 50 years old, saying I've been to all 7 continents, I've been to all 50 states, I've seen the world and experienced it, and couldn't be farther in so many ways from where I started, both spiritually, physically, and emotionally.
It's an incredible victory, man, of overcoming like that. It really is. So again, power to you. Um, where in your travels did it come to you? I need to share this story. I need to write a book.
The book, for a long time, I thought I would write my story, um, but I didn't know that I would share it publicly. So I've always believed that I would write my story. But what's happened over the last few years that really made me desire to write it was the experience I shared with you about my heart opening and beginning to realize that people will love and appreciate you for you, and the bright people around you can accept all the parts of you, good and bad, especially when you're trying to improve those parts of you that aren't as savory.
Yeah.
Right? But there were also some other experiences. Being there when my dad died, that was an experience, and feeling that there was something. And I didn't actually put this in the book, but I'll share with you that after my dad died, I felt the next day something that I would say was his presence, and I think that there were things that he had been alleviated from in his passing. Part of what made him who he was and the struggles he had. Now, there are physical things that happen in our bodies that affect us. And I don't know. As I even read my own stories or share them with my therapist, I think it would be easy to diagnose my father and say that there was some mental illness and that the body sometimes can suppress our spirit. And so I hope that he is free from the things that held him down. But that was one of the experiences. And then the last experience was of my 9 siblings, my sister who taught me to read passed away this past Christmas time. And that solidified my desire to officially, I already had some of this in the works, but to really do it and to release my book to the world.
Sorry for your loss, man. That's rough.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so who were you writing the book to?
At first, I was writing the book to my family, my wife and my children,
Mhm.
even though, there's some of it is a little too harsh for my kids at the ages they're at because of my slower start in life. I'm turning 50, but I have a 7-year-old daughter, and a 13-year-old son. He just turned 13. And I have to tell you, I love being a dad in my 40s, soon to be 50s, because there's no way I could have been this good of a father in my 20s. Yeah, many of my
Right.
friends they're really good grandpas right now, and I'm a dad, but I love it. So I was writing to them, and then as I wrote, there are other people that because so much of my trauma was related to religion and to God and faith in God gone awry. Um, I think there are a lot of people who have left religion because of the people of religion, or have left because or turned their back on things that they once believed in because of their parents or other people around them. And I didn't. And it's not to say I didn't struggle with that, but I didn't. And I'm very blessed because I didn't. And I think that God has been with me along the way. And so part of my journey, I think that makes it unique and different is that I didn't turn from away from the religion. And
Yeah.
I still belong to the religion that my parents belonged to, but I practice it differently. I practice it with a God that I believe in that is a God of love, not of fear, that is a God of care and compassion, not hellfire and brimstone. And it's not to say that there aren't those things. It's not to say that there won't be pain and suffering after this life. But I think the pain and suffering that we will have after this life will be suffering that we look back and see ourselves. I think about my dad, and this. I'm sorry, Dad, if you're listening. But I think about my dad. I think that if he is now free, I imagine that he looks back with pain on the suffering that he caused on his children.
Yeah.
And I think that's what hell is. And I hope that I will see my dad in heaven, and I hope that I can be there and we can embrace each other. But the suffering that maybe he has felt, or the hell that maybe that he goes through, would be probably looking back on his life. I think that's what hell is.
You mentioned that that you still love your dad. You've spoken kindly about them, even though they, kind of set these things in motion and did these things to you and your family. Um, have you, do you think at this point, forgiven them?
Yes, yes, I have. Because I explain this at the end of my book, but I think this is the most powerful message of my book and my life. If I could share it with anyone else and it could affect one person, then I would be happy. And the most powerful message of my life is that um, if you strive and you continue forward, you will reach a place where you have happiness. You will reach a place where you have people that love you surrounding you. I have my wife, Carissa. I have my son, Christian, and my daughter, Victoria. I have friends. I have business colleagues. I have people who work for me. I've worked for other people. All of these people around me who have become my chosen family. And I'm so, so, so blessed. I've been successful with my wife and kids and family. And we struggled with fertility for a while. We successfully have our own children. I've been successful in business, and I've been fortunate to be able to provide for my family, something that my father did not provide for our family. And most importantly, I feel like I have a relationship with God. So my point is you keep striving and you reach a point of happiness. When you look back, you should never say, I want to change something. I don't want to change anything that happened to me. It's not my message that my parents did it wrong and that they should have changed what they did. Um, I don't agree with what they did, but I wouldn't be me without it. And I wouldn't be here without it. And so continue to strive. And when you reach a place where you can celebrate some success, embrace who you are and realize that everything brought you here. It all brought you here. And so embrace it too. And so I've accepted it. So beyond forgiving my parents, I've accepted them. My mother's still living, and I haven't told her about the book. She's in her, mid late 80s. Um, if she reads the book, I think she will be very hurt by it because I don't know that she saw things the way that we experienced them.
Uh,
So I've completely forgiven her, and I completely accept who she is and the choices that she made. it doesn't mean that I agree with them. And I think that's one important thing, and even in society, that we can disagree with people and still love and accept them. And there are other people that, throughout my life that I have disagreed with, but still love and accept them and see them as a person, as, an eternal being, as
Right.
a child of God, or however you want to say it. So yeah, the most important thing I say is accept who you are, embrace everything that brought you here. Don't dwell on the past, mistakes you made, mistakes that others made, because they all brought you here. And then to couple with that, there's a great business book that I love called The Gap and the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And well, he writes it, but Dan Sullivan is behind it as well. Dan Sullivan is one of the is a he's a lion in business and an amazing person. And it says the horizon, you look out at the horizon and it's always moving and you're always moving towards it. And sometimes when you're looking at the horizon, you get caught in the gap between where you are and the horizon saying, oh, I'm not there yet. I'm still not there. And so often we set these goals for ourselves. And as we move towards them, we realize that there's something further out there. And so we move our goals further out. And we don't realize, I mean, as a child, probably the biggest thing I thought I could hope for was maybe to move to the big city of Salt Lake City, Utah. I mean, that was like, if I can do that, I've arrived, I've accomplished something. It's amazing, right? But here I am, standing on mountaintop in Antarctica. And where I am now, I can see so much more that's possible in the future. So we have to be careful to not get so caught up in the horizon line and keep moving, because we're never going to reach the horizon line. It will always move. But if you stop for a minute and you look back and you say, where did I start? And how far have I come? That's the key to happiness. Because if you're only forward looking all the time, and it's not to say you don't set goals, but often we set goals and we accomplish them, but we already don't celebrate them because we see that there's more out on the horizon. So stop and look backwards. And even if you don't make your goal, look backwards and say, but I did come this far. And that's the great lesson. And that's what I'm talking about, that everything that happened in my past, I'm blessed for it. God is the ultimate take lemons and turn them into lemonade guy. And he can do that for us if we will open our eyes and see what he's done.
I love how strong your faith is, even after everything you've been through. Yeah, and that's just a real credit to you. It really is. So, um, I have one more question for you. Before I get to that one, though, how can everybody reach you, find the book, contact you, that kind of thing?
So the book Hiding from the School Bus has a URL, a website, which is simply hidingfromtheschoolbus.com. So you can look it up there and learn a little bit more about my story. And I hope that it inspires someone. And it's also, it will be released on August 16th and will be available on every major platform where you would purchase a book. And then a week or two later, it'll be available on audio platforms like Audible as well.
Nice. Nice. Are you doing the reading?
I did not do the reading. When you realize I tested it. And Rory, I don't have a voice like yours. Your voice is beautiful. But at the same time,
Thanks.
I was reading through, this is funny. I was reading one of the phrases trying to get the tone right and everything. And you realize that, for one, I have my small town Utah accent still. And I didn't know that until I listened to it myself. And I know that's true because I was reading something that said something about four. And instead of four, I said fur. I said, well, I don't want that in the book. And the second thing is that to really do it right, I mean, these people are very talented. They're voice actors. There are quotes and things from all these people, and I hired a voice actor because I really wanted it to come across the right way and to have all the different characters and everything like that. So I know that's a long answer to a short question. I didn't read it, and I think that it's better that way this time.
Gotcha. All right. All right. I understand. Listen, Calvin, you've unpacked so much. It's an incredible story, and obviously, we're all glad that you came through it. And more than that, that it was your faith that saw you through. I mean, it's just such a gigantic lesson. So many people would have strayed from that, and blame the faith or God along with, the acts of the people. And that happens too often in our society. You were able to see that it was the acts of the people, your parents, and not actually, God or your faith that was, causing that for you. That's huge. That's really huge. And so I'm happy for you that you were able to make that distinction, move forward. Um, as we kind of, bring all of this to a close, is there anything I didn't ask you about? Is there anything we talked about maybe you want to double down on? Or after everything you've shared, is there maybe just another really good leave behind you want to leave for the listeners, piece of advice, anything like that? I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor for the last minute here and go ahead and wrap us up.
Oh, thank you, Roy. I appreciate that. You know, there's a phrase that says, if you're going through hell, keep on going. There's always light. And sometimes when you feel like that's the situation, just stop for a minute, take a deep breath, and look around you. There's still beauty all around you, even in the thick of it, even in the worst moments. There was a moment where I had to make a decision to help take my dad out of pain after he had fallen and broken his hip, help take him out of pain, or allow him to continue to be in pain and be alive. But taking out of pain, I knew would lead to him passing. There are hard moments in our life that everyone faces. But in that moment, I'll tell you that there is still beauty in every moment. In that moment, it was on a Sunday. I made the decision for my mom because I didn't want her to have to make that decision. It was too hard for her to make that decision. I said, we're going to take him out of pain. And they began to administer morphine and take him out of pain. And this was on a Sunday, and this was in Utah. And in Utah, you know what? At most of these places, these young 12-year-old boys come and they bring what we call the sacrament, the bread and the water, the emblems of Jesus Christ, And so there's this little knock on the door, and we just had this really deep moment. And I have this really complicated relationship with my father. And the little knock on the door opens. Here's this 12-year-old boy in a white shirt and a tie, holding little pieces of bread. And my dad can't swallow, he can't do anything. But he came in, and we took that little piece of bread and we put it in my dad's mouth. And then they came back with a little cup, and in our church we use water instead of wine. So a little cup, and we put that little cup of water in his mouth. My dad couldn't swallow. A few hours later, he passed away. Passed away with that little piece of bread in the side of his mouth. Now, I have a really complicated relationship with my dad, but I could say that was just a beautiful little tender mercy right there. And so in the harshest moments of our lives, there are little tender mercies. If you just stop, take a breath, breathe, look at the sun, let it warm you, whatever it is that touches you, and feel those tender mercies, because there's something bigger than us. There's something bigger than me. There's something bigger than you. And you can tap into it if you just take a breath for a moment and feel it.
Very well said. Beautiful wrap up. Absolutely beautiful wrap up. Um, Calvin Bagley, author of um, oh goodness, I lost it on my sheet here.
Hiding
Hiding
from the
from the
school
school
bus.
bus, right? Hiding from the school bus, breaking free from control, fear, isolation, and a childhood without education. Brother, thank you for coming on and for sharing the way you did so deeply for all these folks that are listening. I'm sure, I know that somebody's going to hear this and be impacted by it. So I thank you for that. That was huge, and thanks for being on.
Thank you, Rory.
Yeah. Folks, that's another incredible episode of the Power of Man podcast. The reason we bring incredible men like this on with these just utterly incredible messages like this is because we're united in supporting you to take back your power, okay, in your life, and be a better protector, better provider, better leader tomorrow than you are today. To be a better father, a better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we want that for you is because you matter and you have value. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.